everyone, you are welcome. Today I'm here to show you how to plot out graph using Excel and how to make your graph presentable and readable. So for doing that, we are using this data in the graph plotting. So before you start your graph plotting, you are supposed to get two axes, which is the x-axis and your y-axis. So on the Excel sheet, the first column, which is column A, will be the values for the x-axis, and the second column will be the value for the y-axis. And the first row for each column will be the title of the axis. So you are supposed to write the title of the axis for each column, followed by the values of that axis. So after inputting the values for each axis, we select all the values inputted in for each column. Then we go to insert. So after we've gone to insert, you will see charts here. So on the chart, there are a lot of chart representations for this data. We can see pie chart here. We can see bar chart. Then we can see histogram. Then we can see graph that shows trend. So graph that shows trend of values increasing and decreasing. All these kind of graph. Then we can see scatter chart too here. But for this data and for our graph work, we will be using the scatter chart. So we right click on the scatter chart. Then you go to more scatter chart. So there will be a pop-up screen. So this pop-up screen shows all the kinds of graph representation for this data that you can use. And we are choosing the XY scatter graph. And for the XY scatter graph, always there are two graph representation. So here's the first one and here's the second one. But we will go for the second one. So you left click on the second one. Then you click on OK for it to select the second graph. So after the graph has popped out on the screen, the first thing we will do is add up axis titles. So we go to this plus on the right side of the chart. You left click. Then we check axis title. So after you check axis title, you can input the names of the axis. So our y-axis is force, and the x-axis is distance. So we input the axis titles into them. Then now we go to the plus again. Then we check trend line to know how our line of best fit would be. So after checking the trend line, now we can see that there's a lot of space on the graph sheet. And we know that our graph should cover at least 2/3 of the graph sheet. Our points should cover at least 2/3 of the graph sheet. Meaning, if your data doesn't start from 0, from the values you inputted in each column, if none of them start from 0, it is not compulsory for you to start from 0 on the graph sheet. Your origin could be any number. It is not necessary for you to start from 0. Seeing this value, if we start from 0, our graph will be covering a tiny portion of the graph sheet, making our graph very difficult to read. So I am coming to show how we will scale out all the axes, choose the correct scales, and make our graph presentable and readable as well. So the first thing we will do is we go to the y-axis, we left click to select, then we right click to pop up a menu, then we select format axis. So the format axis will bring out a menu at which we can select our minimum values and maximum values for the axis. So when you come to the right side here, we can see minimum value being 0 and maximum value being 60. So we can change our minimum value for this axis to 40 or 42, since our lowest value on the table for that axis was 43.5. So let's assume 40. Then, so after changing it, we can see that our trend for the scale of the y-axis has changed to a readable one. So now we can trace our point to the axis without making any errors out of the tracing. We can still decrease it or increase it to 42. Our minimum value to be 42 to make the graph very readable. So we can see here that it has stretched out very well. It has stretched out very well. And unit here shows the intervals between the points on the axis. So for the major, it tells the point from 42 to 44 to 46. That's the difference between those boxes. So the difference is 2. And the minor is 0.4. So from 42, go to 42.4. So the minor tells from each small box, as we can see from a graph sheet, there are these tiny boxes on the graph sheet, and the difference between these tiny boxes is 0.4. So this tells us how we can read the tiny values on the graph sheet as well. So after we are done with the y-axis, we do same for the x-axis. So we left click to select, then we right click to choose the format axis. After that, we come to the bounds, then to the minimum bound. For the x-axis, we will change it to 12. So for the x-axis, change it to 12. And now we can see that our graph has been presented neatly and readable, taking out the unnecessary points from the graph. Taking out the unnecessary point from the graph. So now we can see that our graph is very readable. So we can see that our graph is very readable. Now the next thing we will do is indicate our change in the x and change in the y values. The 2 points we are choosing to pick out our change in the x and change in y values to calculate for your slope. So before we can do that, we go back to the toolbar, select home, go to insert, then to shapes. So you go to insert on the toolbar, then you go to illustrations. So for other versions of the Excel, the shapes will automatically appear when you type on the insert toolbar. But for the newer ones, they are embedded in the illustrations. So when you click on the illustration, you see pictures, you see shapes and other things too. So we will select the shapes, then choose line. So after choosing the line, you will then come to the graph sheet and draw for the change in y-axis. So for me, I'm choosing the last point and point number 3. So reading from down here, I'll choose the point number 3. So choosing the last point here. And after that, I'll go back again, select line, and I'll choose this point, and I draw it to meet this line. So now I've chosen my point that I'm picking my change of y and change of x values from the graph. So note that this is supposed to be done so that we know the point you are choosing to calculate your slope. After that, you label your graph, write the title of the graph. Then now we can show our slope for this graph. So you go to trend line, there's an arrow connecting the trend line. You tap on it, then you go to more options. So when you go to more options, you scroll down, you see display equation on chart. You see display equation on chart. You select that, and your equation for this line will be shown on the graph. So after calculating your slope manually, you can compare your value to the value that the Excel graph is giving you. You can compare your value to the value that the Excel graph is giving you. So since the fonts on the Excel graph is so tiny, you can change them to make them readable and presentable. So first, I'll change the ASICS titles. So I'll highlight, increase the size of the ASICS titles to make them readable. So I'll highlight, then increase to make them readable. You can do the same for the ASICS. You left click, then increase it to make it readable. Left click, then increase it to make it readable. This is very important so that we can trace out your point very well. You can do the same for the equation of the line. You can increase it to make it readable. You can do the same for the title. You select and highlight. You can bold it. You can underline neatly. You can increase the size to make it readable. And don't forget to add the unit to the ASICS title. So you add the unit if it has a unit. You're supposed to add it to the ASICS title. So this is how to draw the graph using Excel and how to present your graph neatly and readable. So after drawing the graph and you want to export the value and add it to your report, you can use this tool called snipping tool. So you can use snipping tool to snip out or screenshot your graph work and save it neatly. So this is how to use Excel to plot out data.